السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So I will talk about one of the fields of applied ethics, namely Islamic Bioethics. This is also one of the courses that we teach in our program, in our MA program, Applied Islamic Ethics. We have 15 weeks, so it's just mission impossible to speak about what we do in the 15 weeks. So I decided to give very concise overall description of what we do. So we will speak about three key elements this afternoon. The first one about the classical roots of the field, the origins, and then the modern developments, the shifts that happened, and how it works now, Islamic bioethics. And then at the end, we will have an applied example about the beginning of human life to have an idea how both the pre-modern, the classical discussions, and the modern developments influence the recent discussions. I suppose each of you has got this one, this page, the printed. Do you have it? So the point I want to make through this picture, first of all, has any of you seen this picture before? You did it? So this is a good news. Good news. The point I want to make is the following. Bioethics did not come into existence just because we have new modern technologies, not because we have cloning and stem cell research and this stuff. Ethics in the field of medicine and medical treatment, etc., existed since that there is a patient and physician from the very beginning. So some voices now would say, what would Islam have to do with these modern technologies? Islam is born centuries ago. What does it have to do with these cutting-edge research developments? The point I want to make is that medical ethics, whether it is within the Islamic tradition or outside the Islamic tradition, has always existed. We have the Hippocratic Oath, much earlier than Islam, in order to regulate the relationship between the physician and the patient. And throughout history, this field has gone through various developments. Of course, the recent developments, especially from the second half of the 20th century, are overwhelming, and they changed the face of the field. But there was a field before these new technological developments. I have chosen this miniature for our colleagues Dutch-speaking miniature. So first, let's start. What do you see in the picture? People queuing, etc. Okay, and the one in the box looks like the box or the door.
Looks like a doctor.
Looks like a doctor and a patient. And it seems this doctor is doing something for his body in his back. Yeah. You know this practice?
Yes,
cupping, hijama. Yeah, hijama is one of the most intrusive interventions in the body. You make incisions in the body, you make some cuts in the body, etc. Most of the religious scholars say that this is the prelude for surgeries. So it's one of the heavy interventions in the body. This is a miniature from the Maqamat al-Hariri. Do you know Maqamat al-Hariri? It's an anecdotal book consisting of 50 anecdotes. This is anecdote 47. You usually have some fun. It's rhymed narrative, so there is always saj'a and this as we will see now. So we are outside fiqh, we are outside theology, we are something in the real day-to-day culture, street culture, even if you may say, as you see these people queuing in front of this person practicing cupping. And I've chosen it because of its relevance to medical ethics. This is a 12th century work. So the author died 1112, 1112, 1 year after the death of Imam al-Ghazali, Muhammad al-Harir al-Basri. And the photo or the illustration is made by Yahya al-Wasiti, an Iraqi painter, if I'm not mistaken, who lived 1 century after. So he comes from the 13th century. I'm speaking here in the Miladi, in the Christian calendar. He made 100 paintings in order to illustrate the 50 anecdotes in this book. One of the very famous books in Adab. Very, very well known with so many commentaries and explanations. The issue that we want to focus about here is about the physician fees. One of the common themes in medical ethics is what to do if you are a physician and your patient is poor, cannot pay the fees. Would you push him to pay the fees? Would you treat the poor and the rich alike, etc.? All theoretical works about codes of ethics from Hippocrates up till now always have some sections speaking about that. This photo also speaks about that. According to the main person who is telling the story, this person, this expert in cupping, who is treating this person, is saying the following to him. Araka, those who do not know Arabic should wait a little bit, be patient, till we decipher everything. So I will just say it in Arabic first. أراك قد أبرزت لي راسك قبل أن تبرز قرطاسك. You will see the rhymes all the time in the sentences. أراك قد أبرزت لي راسك قبل أن تبرز قرطاسك ووليتني قذالك ولم تقل ذلك ولست ممن يبيع نقدا بدين ولا يطلب أثرا بعد عين فإن أنت رضخت بالعين حجمت في الأخدعين وإن كنت ترى الشح أولى وخزن الفلس في النفس أحلى فاقرأ عبس وتولى واغرب عني وإلا. فقال الفتى والذي حرم صوغ المين كما حرم صيد الحرمين إني لأفلس, and the rest is not in the picture, إني لأفلس من ذي يومين. To translate also for those who know Arabic, because it's a bit difficult text. He's making it in a funny way. As you see, this person, the patient, is looking with his head back to him. So he says, you are showing up with your head. But the purse of money, I don't see. I only see your head. But there is no money. قد أبرزت لي راسك قبل أن تبرز قرطاسك. قرطاسك is the purse, the pocket where you put the money. ووليتني قذالك, and you gave me your back, the back side of your neck. ووليتني قذالك ولم تقل ذلك. Normally, when you look back at me, you don't only give me your back neck, but you also say, this is for you. ذلك. You didn't do that. ولست ممن يبيع نقدا بدين ولا يطلب أثرا بعد عين. So don't say that you will pay later. I don't buy that. فإن رضخت بالعين, if you came up with the money, دراهم والدنانير, حجمت, I will do the cupping for you, في الأخدعين. الأخدعين, we can translate as the tricky veins. When you do the cupping in the veins, there are two veins in this art of cupping, which are so tricky, and only the very people with high expertise will know how to do that. So he said, if you came up with the money, I will even do the cupping for the tricky veins. وإن كنت ترى الشح أولى. But if you prefer to be stingy, so خيرخ for the Dutch speaking people. وإن كنت ترى الشح أولى, if you prefer to be stingy, وخزن الفلس, and you store and accumulate the money. وخزن الفلس في النفس أحلى, if this is more sweet and lovely to you to keep the money. فقرأ, then read عبس وتولى. عبس وتولى is an opening of a chapter in the Quran, which literally means he frowned and left. So he said, then you have to do that. Just frown your face and go away. واغرب عني, go ahead. وإلا, otherwise you will see. So the guy said to him, فقال الفتى والذي حرم صوغ المين, I swear by the one who forbade lying. كما حرم صيد الحرمين, in the same way he forbade and he prohibited hunting animals and birds in the two holy mosques. إني لأفلس, I am more bankrupt than a boy who is 2 days old. So I have nothing in my pocket. So as I said, it looks funny. There is a public, if you read the whole anecdote, this is a very famous person who is doing cupping. People are queuing for him. I think he's giving very nice expressions how crowded it is. Because the one who is telling the story, he wanted to do cupping, but he didn't want to go to the one who does cupping. He wanted this one to come to him. So he sent his servant, but the servant says he doesn't come, he doesn't visit the people. People only come to him because he's so famous. So the storyteller said, after thinking for a while, I said, okay, I will go to him because I need medical treatment anyhow. So he came and he's explaining how famous, how desired this, between brackets, physician is. And when he came, this is what he saw. This is the scene that he saw. What happened later on is that the storyteller and these people queuing were so passionate and found it pity for this guy who needs the treatment and he cannot. So they collected money for him. So he said that he ended up a very rich boy. He paid not only the treatment, but he could afford many other. So you see here a physician and patient. There is a problem about money. The physician is insisting that he pays the money, cash, immediately, not afterwards. People are interfering, trying to save the situation of this person who is not only sick, but also in need, who is poor. And then they solve this through society. The community coming together and collecting money for this patient who is in need of money. I hope that this narrative incident shows that there were discussions about medical ethics a long time ago. This is in the 12th century. Dolly was not cloned. Dr. He, the Chinese, didn't gene edit the babies. Nothing of the big things that we have seen the last years were there. So ethics and its interplay with medicine has always existed. It's not something new. And it existed in the Islamic tradition. And it existed in the Islamic tradition not only in the religious sense, but also in the public sense, as we see from this miniature or miniature for the Dutch people. So when people discussed the medical, so this is the first element now, the classical roots. When people discussed issues related to medical ethics, what kind of sources did they consult in order to come to a conclusion? How did it work? First of all, as Islam is a religion with a scripture, so they would look for the scripture in the beginning. As I mentioned in the first day, I think, or this is the second day, yeah? So it should have been yesterday. The whole issue is that we are looking for knowing the will of God, and then we try to achieve it, to implement it. One of the easy ways and shortcuts to know the will of God is through His own word. that he literally communicated, this is the Quran, or he communicated its purport and its meaning to one of his prophets, that's here Prophet Muhammad in the Sunnah or in the Hadith. So consulting religious scriptures, the Quran and Sunnah was an important one. And around these two scriptures, we had disciplines. So we have Hadith commentary, Shuruh al-Ahadith, and we have Quran exegesis and Quranic sciences, Hadith sciences, etc. So this was an important source of knowledge for the scholars or anyone who wants to say something about medical ethics at these times, pre-modern times. The second one is the medical sources, because it has to do with the body, and body is the subject of the science of medicine. And healthcare, taking care of the physical well-being of the person. So you need to know information about this body in order to judge if a certain act or intervention is good or bad. So there were the Greek sources, or let's say, what do you call it, sciences of the ancients, علوم الأوائل, in Greek, coming from Greek, Indian, and to a certain extent also Persian traditions. These sources were available in Arabic. And by time they were Arabized, Islamized, much more advances in these works, and Muslims and non-Muslim physicians wrote commentaries about them and developed their work, but they had their own Greek, Indian, or Persian origins. And the third one is the philosophical, which has also its own Greek origins. Most of the time, the medical and the philosophical were almost inseparably linked together. So you have works on medicine, but they also include philosophy, or in philosophy, and they also include medical information. For instance, one of the famous works on medicine, written by Hippocrates, it's called On the Nature of Man, which explained the theory of humors. You know the theory of humors, that there was the understanding, the perception that our bodies consist of 4 elements: phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, and blood. And these 4 elements are either cold, hot, wet, or dry. So these 4 elements should correspond with one of the 4 characteristics. And these should also interact with 4 elements of the universe. So the human being is a microcosm, and we have the macrocosm. The macrocosm, the human body, consists of 4 elements in 4 states. And then we have the macrocosm consisting of 4 elements. That is water, fire, dust, and air. All these things interact together and affect our well-being. This was the perception. This is, but also philosophical, about what is a human being, what is a human body, what is the setting and the position of the human body in the universe, etc. So the medical and the philosophical were inseparably linked together. And as I said, the important book about the 4 elements by explaining the theory of humorism, al-Akhlat in Arabic, al-Akhlat al-Arba'a, al-Anasir al-Arba'a, spoke about the medicine, but also spoke about philosophy. By mixing all these sources together, we had disciplines in which we can find differences with relevance to medical ethics. One of them, for instance, theology. One of them is fiqh. Theology and theological works had various references with relevance to medical ethics, and they are still used till today. Fiqh, much more even. There is hardly any chapter in fiqh that you cannot find some references with relevance to medical ethics. Let's start with ablution, ritual purification, tahara. You have to wash certain parts of your body. What if my skin will be harmed by this water? What should I do? Then you have to do the dry ablution, tayammum. What kind of excuses will be valid to move from water ablution to dry ablution. You need medical information to judge these issues. You go to praying. You have to do some physical movements. You stand, you bow, you prostrate. If you have some backbone problems, etc., then you are exempted from some movements. Which medical problems will give you concessions from some obligations in the prayer? You need medical information. Fasting, you are obliged to fast 1 month in the year, but if this fasting will deteriorate your health or create risks for your health condition, then you are exempted. But what kind of health risks? If I'm a diabetes, 1 or 2, would this exempt me from? Wherever you go, almost in every single chapter in the fiqh, you have always references. So we have disciplines. And if you want to know about pre-modern medical ethics in the Islamic tradition, you have to go through the disciplines. And you have to go through the disciplines and be aware of the discipline you are studying in. So if you have some information and they are coming from fiqh, don't say, but this is too fiqhi. Too much fiqh. Yes, because it's coming from the fiqh. This faqih is not a historian. He is not a theologian. He is writing a book on fiqh. And if you are studying a work on theology, then you have to know that this is the discipline of theology. So that you extract the information without losing the context in which this information is given and is provided. And then we have also genres. Some genres had quite good relevance for medical ethics, like for instance, Hisbah. Hisbah, this is controlling and supervising public morality, applied ethics, that people are doing their work in public in accordance with the, let's say, moral norms of the society. So you had in the Hisbah professional ethics for butchers, nurses, midwives, physicians, etc. So you will have healthcare professionals with their codes of ethics in these works on Hisbah, as it is practiced day in, day out. We have also prophetic medicine. We will speak about this. And we have adab al-tabib, practical ethics of the physician. We will speak about as well. The first session till what time? Till 2? Okay. So studying medical ethics in the pre-modern time, we have to be aware of the discipline approach. Like here, when we have discussions about rituals and practicing rituals, whether it's tahara, salat, siyam, zakat, etc., it is addressed in the fiqh. In theology, I think I gave the example yesterday about medical treatment. Some issues in theology will intersect with medical treatment. And these issues and these questions were raised very early on by companions of the Prophet ﷺ when they asked him about if we believe in God, who is all-powerful, all omnipotent, omniscient, and who predestined everything, even before we are created, why are we going to take medicine? God predestined that I'll be sick. God predestined that I will recover. So I'll be sick that day and I will recover after 10 days. Why would I take, how would this fit into this theological framework? Questions were different, differently formulated. Most of the time the answer was when, uniformly formed, saying that hiya, these forms of medical treatment, min qadarillah, they make part of divine destiny. It's a very short answer with so many commentaries later on from theologians and scholars of hadith commentaries explaining that we have here to do with natural laws. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not like a dictator who is deciding haphazardly every second. This one will be sick today, will recover tomorrow. No, he created natural laws. Because of these natural laws, and within these natural laws, people will have their normal course of life. So you have a normal health condition. You will deviate from the normal health condition because of some practices. You will have disturbances, imbalances, as they used to call it in the pre-modern time, imbalances in your elements, in your humors in the body. In order to regain the normal health condition, you have to change your lifestyle and you have to take some medicines, etc. Doing that is part of the divine destiny as well, and is part of respecting divine destiny, because it's not tyrannic, it's not dictatorial, it's system that you have to understand and that you have to follow. And of course, some religious scholars, especially in the modern time, said that this theological framework was one of the very important elements in creating an environment for thriving medicine in Islamic civilization. Because if you don't have that, so if you have the feeling that everything happens haphazardly and we have nothing to do, there is no way for improving medicine, because we don't need it. Everything happens because God decides and there are no laws, etc. So we don't want to understand why things happened, how we can fix them. But this theological framework helped improving the medicine according to these scholars. So that's why we had in Islamic history the phenomenon of jurist-physician or physician-jurist or scholar-physician, physician-scholar. الطبيب الفقيه والفقيه الطبيب. If we read the biographical works on medicine, like for instance in طبقات الأطباء for Ibn Abi Usaybi'a, you will find some physicians who were also jurists, fuqaha. And if you read the biographical works of jurists, you will find some of them who were also physicians. Like for instance, Subki, when he writes the biographical works on the biographies of Shafi'i jurists, he mentioned Ibn Nafis, the very famous discoverer of the blood circulation, and so on. We have Averroes, Ibn Rushd, the one who wrote, Dr. Mu'taz spoke about his book on بداية المجتهد ونهاية المقتصد, one of the very important authoritative references on fiqh across schools of jurisprudence. And he also wrote very important works in medicine as well, and very authoritative ones as well. So we had this phenomenon of interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary scholars, not by chance, because this overlap between the subject of fiqh and the subject of medicine, that both of them work on the body of the human being, because the body is the vehicle through which you implement the religious obligation. And I think Imam al-Ghazali mentioned this literally. الدابة التي تحمل الإنسان, or something like that. It is the vehicle that you use in order to do the religious obligations. So it is the subject of fiqh, but it is also the subject of medicine. And you can hardly do the one without the other. So it's very natural that you have people who would work on both, and you will have references in historical work saying that كان يفزع إليه في الفتوى كما يفزع إليه في الطب. People would go to him, will literally run into him if they have a question about a religious question, in the same way that they would run into him if they have a question about medicine. So we had this phenomenon. These are examples of books. On your left side, معيد النعم ومبيد النقم. This is one of the books that you enjoy reading, and I think it's also translated into English a long time ago by one of the Orientalists. It's by Al-Subki, and it is falls within the genre of Hisbah that I spoke about public morality. And he dedicated a chapter about the codes of ethics for physicians, al-atibba. So we here have a work related to the field of medical ethics written by a jurist. But most of the time, references to medical ethics book. They were not in a distinct book. Most of the time dispersed throughout chapters in the fiqh or chapters in theology or specific genres, etc. But we have one of the good exceptions, Ahkam al-Marda by Ahmed, by the Hanafi jurist, Ibn Tajddin al-Hanafi, who's from the 11th century, is also late a little bit. Hijrah, 11th century Hijrah, so we speak about 17th century, who wrote a book entitled Ahkam al-Marda. So he collected all the references in the various chapters of Hanafi works. For instance, Salat, some rulings would change if the person is sick, so he will collect all these rulings. In a chapter on fasting, some rulings would change if we have a sick person. He will collect all these ones. And he brought them together. If we read the introduction of the book, why did he write in my life? So every time I had to check so many chapters, etc. So I thought it will be a good reference for me and people whose health condition is poor, like myself. This is one of the let's say very few exceptions. I'm not aware of works like that except his work. The genre on prophetic medicine. Genre on prophetic medicine started in the 3rd century. Hijrah, 9th century. This work, الرسالة الذهبية by Imam al-Rida, attributed to Imam al-Rida. I myself have great doubts that he wrote it. The people who edited the work and who edited the manuscript believe that he did. It's a Greek medicine. It's a Greek medicine. There is hardly any Quran verse or hadith, etc. There are some references that you can link them to Quran or hadith, etc. Anyhow, this is one of the earliest works which belong to this genre. By the way, in the Shia tradition, they have, besides prophetic medicine, the Imami medicine, Tibbul A'imma, so in which they will record not only the statements of the Prophet, but those of the Imams, especially the 12 Imams. So these are all examples of these works. This is the work of Al-Dhahabi. This is the work of Ibn al-Qayyim. This is the work of Muwaffaq al-Din, Abdul Latif al-Baghdadi, from the 7th century of Hijrah. And this is a very important work, Al-Ahkam al-Nabawiyya fi al-Sana'a al-Tibbiyya, written by Ibn Tarkhan al-Hamawi. Ibn Tarkhan al-Hamawi comes back from the 8th century of Hijrah. He was, to my knowledge, the first physician to write about that. Most of the time, these are religious scholars, especially hadith scholars, who would collect the hadith of the Prophet, which relate to medicine, and they collect it together. This was a physician who would give a commentary with his background in medicine about these hadith. His work was extensively quoted by Ibn al-Qayyim in his work on Al-Tibb al-Nabawi. The work of Ibn al-Qayyim is one of the most famous. Ibn al-Qayyim quoted pages after pages from this work without referring any single time to this work. Although Ibn al-Qayyim was very, very good in referencing and documenting his information, this needs a study. Why did he do this and what happened exactly? And in my reading, some of the opinions that Ibn al-Qayyim adopted go back to Ibn Tarkhan al-Hamawi, who changed the mainstream position because of his medical background. And Ibn al-Qayyim adopted this, but he didn't say that this is the opinion of. Anyhow, we have a very rich genre on prophetic medicine. Part of this genre is about therapeutics, medical treatment, specific herbs, materials used in order to treat specific medicines, like the cupping and specific herbs in Arabian Peninsula at this time. Nowadays, we have prophetic medicine in our modern time has been reduced to this part only. So when we speak about prophetic medicine, we speak about the types of treatment that the Prophet ﷺ approved or proposed. That's it. Although throughout history, there has been a big question whether these therapeutics proposed by the Prophet make part of Sharia or not. In what capacity did he propose these drugs or treatments? And there are some scholars like Ibn Khaldun, for instance, and by the way, this is now more or less the majority opinion among contemporary religious scholars, that he didn't do this in the capacity of a prophet, but in the capacity of a human being who was living in Arabian Peninsula at this time. And we have some good references about this. Anyhow, but prophetic medicine is not only about medicine, but it's also about ethics. For instance, the question of, do we have to take medical treatment or have trust in God? Tadawi versus tawakkul. About spiritual medicine, that you improve your physical health by improving your soul. Makes a good part of this genre. Improving lifestyle, moderation, i'tidal in the lifestyle and how much it can impact our health condition. Cross-gender relations. Can a woman treat a man or a man treat a woman? Can a man visit a male patient or a female visit a male, etc.? These cross-gender relations, we find them also in these works. Etiquettes of visiting patients. Like, for instance, when you visit a patient, you don't recall all the stories of the people who died because of this very disease. Many things that you should give hope-giving anecdotes and فَنَفِّسُوا لَهُ فِي الْأَجَلِ. There are some hadiths about that. And etiquettes of the physician himself and how to treat his patients, about compassion, etc. The other genre which I spoke about was adab al-tabib, which we can literally translate as the etiquettes of the physician or practical ethics of the physician or applied medical ethics. This genre has its origins in the Greek tradition. As I said, Hippocratic Oath, the works of Hippocrates, Galen, and many others. Spoke about the etiquettes of the physician. The earliest work we have is Adab al-Tabib by Ishaq ibn Ali al-Ruhawi. The book is available in Arabic, in English. It has been studied many times. We have so many articles about it, analytical works, etc. So one of the books that received quite good attention. We have great debate about the religious identity of the author, whether the author is a Christian, is a Jew, is a Muslim, etc. I gave a lecture about this a couple of weeks ago in Arabic. And I couldn't come to a conclusion about the religious identity of the author. And I said it's not a big deal, because this is a question that which is important for us now, in order to say who has this legacy, who wrote this, when. So as Muslims we say we are the ones, we are the pioneers who did this. Anyhow, but I said that it belongs to the Islamic civilization. Whether the author is a Muslim or not doesn't matter. It belongs to the Islam. It's a product of the Islamic civilization in the 4th century of Hijrah. We have the work of Al-Razi, Akhlaq al-Tabib. We have في بين الحاجة الأطباء وطب الأطباء ووصاياهم. So we have a number of works which identified and classified, explained with some details and critical insights about the physician. And this is completely different than the fiqh works. The fiqh works are about the act, the act. But this is about developing and refining the character of the agent, the one who is producing the act. So nowadays we have virtue ethics. This is what we speak about here, adab al-tabib. And we have utilitarian ethics. As long as your act produces the most benefits and the least harms, then it is a good act. Whether you are doing this act just to be the chief physician in your hospital, and actually, factually, you didn't care for a second about these people in the hospital, and they may all go to hell at the end. You don't care. But all what you care about is that you become the boss. And in order to become the boss, you have to fulfill the codes of ethics. This is a good act. From a utilitarian perspective, it's a good act. But you are not a good agent. You don't have a good character. This is the focus of edible tabib. This is the focus of edible tabib. And of course, people would say, ethicists would say, without virtue ethics, you can never guarantee a good practice on the ground. Because as a human being, you can always move around. Whatever codes and how strict they are, you can always move around. If you don't have conscience and conscientious observation on your acts by your own self, it will never be as optimal and as good as we think. And this is the content of the some of the references in this edible tabib. Virtues of the physician: should be humble, should have trust in God, shouldn't be talkative, he should respect the confidentiality of information and privacy of people, should be professional. This was one of the important moral debates in these works, that the good physician, from a moral perspective, in order to produce and generate good acts, he must be a good physician in his own or her own profession. So if you are not well trained and recognized by your peers as a physician, whatever you do is bad. Even if it happened by luck that you could treat some people, you remain a bad person because you are a charlatan. And there are so many names for this, الحيل المحتالين الخداعين and all these. And the works on edible tabib, they spent great space writing on this issue. And of course, the relationship with the patient, the obligation of treating the poor, completely against the anecdote we started with. That this was not a good medical ethics. What this hajjam, the person practicing hijama, did, supervising the patient's nutrition, following the patient's health condition after taking the prescribed drugs, telling truth and ways of communication, etc. Many of the questions that we are struggling and grappling with in our modern time. Like, for instance, if we have bad news for the patient, should we tell the patient? Shouldn't we tell the patient? If yes, how we should tell the patient? These works have extensive analysis of these issues. And should we tell the family? Shouldn't we tell the family? Should we tell the family only? All these things have been discussed in this genre. The problem is that nowadays, and this is what we will discuss in the second part, we think that medical ethics is fiqh. We have to look into the fiqh so that we know. But fiqh is not, medical ethics is not only in fiqh. Fiqh is one of the disciplines, and I would say one of the important disciplines that contributed to medical ethics in the pre-modern time. But surely not the only one. There are many other genres, as I explained, and many other sources that must be consulted in order to have a good picture, as comprehensive as possible, about medical ethics in the pre-modern time, like these works. By this, we finished the pre-modern, more or less. After the break, we take the break now. After the break, inshallah, we will go to the modern developments and the type of challenges that happened. Okay? Okay, thank you.